Oh, it's in a flying saucer.
You've seen one?
Yes, definitely.
Unidentified aerial phenomena.
To cover up our mistakes.
I've met people who swear they've seen Bigfoot.
Join us for a journey into the obscure.
You are now listening to The Wow Pod.
All right, everyone. We're on tonight with Nathaniel Gillis, and he is a demonologist. Where are you calling from, Nathaniel?
Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio. Okay, and we want to get into your story. We've got a couple of questions, but first we want to start out with a little bit of a news story.
Are you going to cover the...
Yeah, we've got
we've got to.
We've got to talk about the
monolith.
Yeah, there's a monolith that was found here in Utah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, isn't that wild?
What in the heck?
It is very wild. And the monolith, it just popped up. So there's lots of questions about it. Where does it come from? Who put it there? How long has it been there? That's probably my biggest question is how long has it been there? Has it been there for a while? Has it, is it just,
Are there monkeys nearby?
Something that someone put up real quick? Yeah. I mean, that's...
Are there apes circling it?
Are there apes circling it? But yeah, so
were they just out of the shot?
Yeah, so we've got there's a little bit of a news coverage here. We don't know.
So it's 12 foot tall.
Yeah, this is coming off of Inside Edition, but we'll play a little bit of this without the sound and chat about it. But
it's a baffling mystery.
It's just wild.
So it's 10 to 12 foot tall. That's above ground. And so we don't know how much is below it, how they put it in. It does look like it might be a little soft at the bottom, but that's hard to tell with that red rock.
They don't, I mean, what's the plan? Are they gonna tell us what it's made of?
There's the monkeys.
There's the monkeys.
Yep.
See, that's what I'm saying. Do they dance around it at sundown?
It looks like it's made out of steel or aluminum. The sheen looks to me like steel. But so a helicopter pilot that works for like the wildlife resources and what have you is flying along and he sees a shine down in kind of a canyon. So they land the helicopter and go walking down to have a look at it. They say it's made of some sort of metal. It's really shiny, as you can see in the video.
It doesn't look like it's rusted.
Yeah.
So that may, play into how long it's been there, but
yeah, and it's got that darker shine.
It's crazy.
It kind of, to me, it looks like steel. I mean, that's what it looks like. Yeah. What is it? Are the aliens coming? Is this the sign that...
That's the marker. That's the landing post.
Hey, so we get the honor of meeting the aliens. But yeah, so that just kind of popped up.
That's crazy.
Just out of the blue. It's kind of wild. And they're not telling anyone where it's at because they're afraid people will, get injured on their way to it. Down there it can be rough country, I suppose.
Well, especially this time of year, you're going to start having some really, really cold nights
and flash floods.
And if you get stuck out in these narrows down in southern Utah, the temperature change is pretty astonishing from daytime to nighttime. Like it's hypothermia levels at dusk.
Easy.
And then 100 degrees in the daytime.
Well, right now it's not 100. It might get up around 65, 70. But the drastic drop when it gets dark, you almost can't prepare for it.
Yeah. Especially if you're like, some layman guy just going out there looking for a monolith and you're not used to this territory.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so let's get on with Nathaniel. So Nathaniel, you're a demonologist.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so give the
How does this start?
give the listeners, the
Is
viewers.
this like when you were a kid, your parents were like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I asked my son that today.
Definitely not. It actually began when I moved into a new house and saw a full-bodied apparition at the open house prior to us purchasing it. And then once we moved into it, it was just a malevolent haunting. And so I would see shadow people. I would see just a profound violence. It wasn't as violent as others I've witnessed, but shadow figures, a smoky apparition would kind of float throughout the room at nighttime. And so whatever it was that I encountered, it left such an impression on me that it made me want to actually research this more so I could have a better understanding of what it was I encountered.
How old were you?
8, 9 years old.
You were 8. You went to an open house, probably with your folks, and you saw the apparition at the open house.
Yep, I
What-
was
What did
in
it
my
look
future
like?
room.
It was in your room.
Yeah.
And
It's
you didn't
very
go.
interesting because I remember kneeling down by the bed that was in the room, and I just pulled the little blanket up. And when I did, I was met face to face with a full-bodied apparition of, it looked to be like a 6-year-old girl. She had black hair, was in a white linen dress that was very antiquated.
And you didn't yank Dad and say, "I don't want to live here. I don't want to live here. I don't want to live here."
I didn't know what to think about that, honestly. It was very weird because...
And it was under the bed.
Yeah.
Did it have like a creepy feel? Obviously, I would have died. But did it have like?
Did you know right then that it was malevolent?
Did that feel malevolent?
No, because she had a very human reaction. Like what she did when we were both startled. And when I startled her, she shimmied her little body to the furthest part of the bed, where like she had shoved her body all the way up against the wall.
So she scurried back.
Right.
You probably jumped back.
Yeah.
And then what did you do?
I didn't tell anybody until we got in the car. Because for some reason, I was young, but in my mind, I couldn't place her. And so the only thing I could come up with at that time was maybe she was a kid in the neighborhood, and waited till the family left and she snuck in, or maybe she belonged to the family that was selling the house. I was trying to rationalize it.
Yeah, I would have too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, okay. All right.
So later when you got to the car, who did you tell?
I told my father, and he kind of just shrugged it off and said that the home itself was owned by an elderly couple, and once they died, I guess they left it up to the family, and the family sold it. But there was no little girls in the family that would have been there. So
then you're
that was
thinking probably a neighborhood kid then.
Right. That's what I thought too.
Okay.
But it wasn't. I mean, once we moved into the house, it started with heavy print, like not footprints, but footfall, I guess, of an entity displacing its weight on our wooden floors at night, and I could hear it creaking all the way up to my door. And then I was playing video games one evening, and I caught something out of the corner of my right eye, and I looked out the window, and there was a 7-foot-tall shadow figure just watching me. And it was a very interesting time in my life, but the only way I was able to rationalize this event was to kind of tell myself that I didn't really have a reason to be afraid of these entities. And I had to convince myself that the only reason I was afraid of them is because I didn't understand what they were. And so that was kind of a coping mechanism that I used and evolved in later on in my career. And so now when I go into houses and do cleansings and investigations, it's almost as if I developed a certain immunity. You know what I mean? Because of what I went through in that house, a lot of things that would usually startle people, it kind of loses its effect with me sometimes. So far.
Oh man. Yeah, so okay, was it a demon that was haunting your room?
I believe it was a ghost. And I do believe it was somebody that committed suicide in the home. I say that because about a year into living in the house, I started having back-to-back nightmares. They were the same nightmares every night. They were the same kind, and it was always in black and white. And then the nightmare would always consist of a young man sitting on a picnic table, and I would be floating towards him, and then he would turn around, kind of grin at me, pull out a .357 Magnum, stick it in his mouth, and pull the trigger. And then,
What?
And you would watch this?
yes, that would
So
be the
you-
nightmare. And so then I would wake up with a cold sweat, and there would be a presence in the room with me that was paralyzing. I mean, it was just, you want to talk about fear. It would just lock you down. And so, it really left an impact on me personally, because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why this was happening to me. And it wasn't until it all came to a head one night. And finally, I just, I had failed a grade at school, guys. Just going to put it out there, because I was staying up all night and then getting maybe 30 minutes of sleep before I go to school. I go to school and I just pass out. I'm tired,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
afraid of going to sleep.
Probably afraid of sleeping, and
Just tormented.
every night would have been horrible. It would have. How do you? Oh man.
It
So
was tough. I would have to like pull my mattress in my parents' bedroom,
how old were you when it really escalated like that?
I was about 10
Okay, so
when
about
it really started to pick up.
about 2 years after you bought the house. Now,
Yes, sir.
this dream of the guy committing suicide, do you think that was maybe an imprint, like an imprint type haunting dream, or?
I don't think so. Usually imprints are just apparitions or something that you see in passing.
Yeah.
This was very confrontational. I wanted to make sure that I knew it was present, and it would be eye contact involved in the dream as well. And so it was a very confrontational entity. It would follow me. I would go spend the night at friends' houses, and it would walk up the stairs, and I would be just watching, because we're kids. And so I would sleep in my friend's room, and right across the hallway, I could see him sleeping in his mom's bed with his mom, and yet I'm hearing someone who has a lot of weight walk up the steps. So this entity it would manifest in different ways, but it was a profound moment for sure.
And it was attached to you, not necessarily the house.
I don't know. I really don't know. And now that you bring that up, about 3 years ago, I had went back to the house. I'm still good friends with some of the neighbors, and I did get to talk to the people that are in the home. They weren't there, unfortunately, but the neighbors told me that the owner of the house cannot keep tenants in there longer than 4 months at a time.
Oh.
So,
Right? It's classic haunting.
did anyone else in your family experience anything when this was going on with you?
So while we were living there, my father never really kind of confided in me about what his experiences were. Yes, to answer your question. But even more than that, it wasn't until we actually were moving out of the house that my dad was like, look, Nate, he goes, I never wanted to encourage what you were experiencing or try to give you validation or, I just thought it was in your head. He said, he said there have been times when he also felt like someone had died there, and there would be just that classic feeling of being watched. And so, but that's what inspired me to get in this field and try to understand their end game. What are these manifestations all about? And so what I've done recently is I've just poured myself into the literature about incubus, succubus entities, what exactly a demon is, how they think. They're ancient, at least in belief system. And so my whole deal here is that I want to understand the way they think and what their worldview is, because I think that in many cases, we as researchers are misinterpreting the phenomenon.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so tell me, what have you learned? What are they?
Well, yeah.
Okay, so there is no biblical text or any ancient text that says that demons are fallen angels. It's not there. What we do have is what's called the Etiology of Evil in the book of Genesis, chapter 6. However, that teaching explicitly states that demons were the disincarnate ghosts of the nephilim.
Okay.
So demons are
Ghosts.
ghosts of the Nephilim, not
They're
they
ghosts,
aren't human.
period. And there are many ways that I can prove that. Number one, it's not new life discovered. It's old life discovered in a new way. Number two, here's how we know that these entities, they are disincarnate, basically consciousness. Here's how we know, because the exorcistic rite employed by the Catholic Church was written towards what's called corpse pollution.
What is that?
Okay, so it comes out of the book of Numbers, chapter 19 and 11, and it's in the Bible. And essentially, corpse pollution was that when you go into a house, this is going to sound like a haunting investigation, by the way. When you go into a house and there's a corpse in there, and you touch that corpse, the idea was that you become defiled by that death.
Oh.
Really?
Now, moving further with that thought, they have what's called the open vessel law. This is where possession comes from. The open vessel law states that it wasn't just the physical body that could defile you by touch, but it was that when they died, that individual died, there was a gas, a spirit that left their body, and it would move throughout the house. And so the open vessel law says that even if you have food that wasn't properly packaged, that too will become defiled by that disincarnate consciousness. So when we look at that, we have to compare that to possession and understand what possession is. It's when that entity looks into all the voids of the victim and steps into them. It's the open vessel law.
Is that a
Now,
conscious thing that they're doing?
I'm sorry?
Are we talking a conscious
Yes.
stepping into not just their energy or their whatever it is floating about and
Right.
moving through or into things, but a consciousness?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's why when we have possession cases, we have what I call memory in motion. You're going to see a new language preference, a new version of morality. And in many cases, these entities have separate belief systems than the actual person they're possessing. And so what we have to understand with the whole concept is that was the origin of the exorcistic rite. So like when you go to the Vatican and they do the sprinkling of holy water,
yes,
where does it come from, right? It comes from that passage in the Bible.
Okay.
And so my last point before because I don't want to ramble, but if these are not fallen, if these are not entities that as in Numbers 19, if they're not disincarnate consciousness and ghosts, why are they responding like they are? Right? Because these exorcists are working.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's almost as if they're more knowledgeable about their condition than we are about their cure. And I think that's where the heartbeat of this research has to be couched at this point.
So now you said the demons are disembodied souls of the Nephilim. And
that was a theory. However, I want to say this, that I do not believe that they are exclusively disembodied souls of the Nephilim. I believe that the scholars in biblical antiquity were doing their best to articulate afterlife phenomena. And so they just said, okay, it's exclusive to the Nephilim. I don't think that's true at all, because we have entities that are not Nephilim that are possessing people.
Yeah, because the Nephilim are after man was made. That was
correct.
Angels breeding with humans.
Correct.
And
then that goes into very problematic issues in itself, but you're right.
And then you've got the fallen angels, which are older than that would be, obviously. And, and then, I don't know, what's your thoughts on the Lilith avenue of the mother of demons?
Well, Lilith is your succubus.
Mm-hmm.
And
but wasn't
she's called Lamish too.
Wasn't she cursed by God to be the mother of demons?
We don't know if she was cursed by God to be that, or if she just was in general. But here's something that I teach all of the people that come to me, and I like students of mine. I teach them that demons are not what their names are; they're what they do. And so when you go into the succubus, you go looking for victimology, and you look at what's called the sexual pathology of the succubus, and you start to see that Lilith was just a succubus spirit, right? The legend was that she seduced Adam, and copulated with them and then created demons. Truthfully, what we have is just this same phenomenon we're experiencing in modernity, right? It's a spirit that manifests two men as a woman, in order to have a relationship with them. I don't know what I can say on the show.
No, you say whatever you want.
Okay. So, you know, have a intercourse basically with them and try to copulate, try to procreate with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not what they're called. They're what they do. What's their victimology? What is their mindset? What are they after? And so it wasn't until I began to research the incubus, and I said, okay, what's the incubus? And so I went into Father Sinistrari of Amino's work and Montague Summers' work and some of the medieval manuscripts. And the incubus was a spirit that manifested to women as a man. And the incubus is very interesting. If we can take this little portion of time to talk about the incubus. The incubus was not limited to inducing the female into a sleep state, because that's what everybody believed, right? It was just a spirit that showed up in her dream, and she thought, okay, it's just, you know, it's a whatever, a good or bad dream, no big deal. She get up and go to work tomorrow. That was never the case. Montague Summers and Father Sinistrari of Amino would actually go into homes within an hour of the event taking place and collect semen samples. So these entities,
semen samples from the incubus. So the green stuff that got Ray in Ghostbusters.
Yes. So and you're exactly right. It was discolored, because we can go down that rabbit trail too. But Montague Summers and Father Sinistrari both came to the same conclusion. It was that these entities were vampires in the sense that they would milk the carcasses of the dead, reanimate the body through possession, harvest semen, take it to a living woman as an incubus, right? And then try to implant it into her womb. It's classic UFO abduction phenomenon. It's the same.
Were they successful in it?
Yes.
So they got women pregnant?
Yes. That's you know, if you go back into your medieval manuscripts, there's a myriad amount of people who were said to have been progeny from those unions. Like Merlin was one of them, you know.
So when they got him, so Merlin was a child of an incubus.
Yes, that was the legend.
So,
and it's very interesting because they actually go into detail about how the entity manifested and how he groomed Merlin's mother.
So are those children of those copulations, are they commonly gifted, or do they take on some of the maybe intelligence or otherworldliness or whatever of the entity?
Yes. So what they were doing and what they're still doing to this day, because again, I look at the victimology and I look at patterns, right? I'm looking for something that's what they call a thematic element that ties periods of history together. Does that make sense? Where we can say, okay, look at the footprints of their behavior and all that stuff. This is what they're doing. So what they've been doing since biblical antiquity is impregnating women, killing the child in the womb, placing other consciousness in it.
Oh.
That's why when you go to Genesis 6 and Nephilim, Nephal, before they even had vowels in the Hebrew language, Nephal meant stillbirth, infant death. Okay, what are they doing? They're impregnating and killing the baby, and then taking consciousness and putting it in it. It's the same thing that they've always been doing that. Now, in the UFO abduction phenomenon, we would call it the missing fetus syndrome.
Okay,
right?
I've never heard of that.
Yep, you have virgins who are abducted, and during their experience, a woman will walk up to them, hand them a baby, and say, "This is your child," and it looks just like the woman.
Okay,
she's
yeah,
she's a virgin.
Or they've been taken onto a ship, and then they get introduced to their children on the craft. Yeah, we've heard about that. I believe it was one of the interviewees we had talked about that.
Yeah, it was a gentleman in our case. We interviewed him, and he said that during his abduction, he was introduced to a child that he said, you know, call it whatever, but I know 100% that is mine.
You're like an indigo child, I think is the theory on that.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating aspect of this research, but that's essentially what they're doing. And so when you follow their footsteps and their behavioral patterns in Genesis 6, that's what they were doing. They were impregnating women.
What's the end game with this? What are they trying to get to?
Okay, what they're trying to do is they're switching consciousness. So let's go back to Genesis 6. In Genesis 6, basically the text says that they married women, copulated with them, and had offspring. Now, one of the things that we have to really look at here is what's called the Apocrypha of John. It's a Coptic manuscript preserved by Egyptian monks. In my research, personally, this was the only time I got a hold of something that was substantive enough to say, okay, this gives me enough details to understand, right, what happened in Genesis 6. It says that these entities were incubi, right? Follow what they do. And that they first waited until the husbands would leave their wives. I don't know if they went hunting, went to work, I don't know. And we don't even know if the husbands probably died, most likely. And then they would show up in the middle of the night in the apparition of their husbands, right? And so then they would groom that woman into intercourse, take what they've harvested from someone else and place it in her womb. Now, in the Apocrypha of John, it says that at the moment of conception, wink, wink, they would stare into the faces of these women, and then they would reverse their apparition to what they really looked like.
Oh, no.
Okay? Here's the end game.
Now imagine...
That was an ancient obstetric tradition. And the belief was, and like I said before, they have an ancient worldview. Their belief was that whatever man the woman was focused upon at the moment of conception, she will create the physical image of in her body as a child. So what's the end game? We're used to transient possession, right? These entities go find dear Ed, and next thing you know, you got her speaking Latin.
Well, yeah. If they're, and also they've got to go in there and fight with an existing soul to maintain control. But this way, if they can take the infant and eliminate the soul that's in there, then they don't have to fight with it. They have complete control. But
exactly right.
Is that just them trying to gain mortality for 80 years or whatever?
Yep, until they find another victim, another host, right? Until they create another host. So what's most important about this part of the research is that because we understand what they were thinking in Genesis 6, now we can know for sure what their intentions were. They wanted to possess a body that looked like their own apparition.
Now the first
So these babies, before we leave, these babies are then born, correct?
But they're born with the soul of
someone else in them,
of whatever the apparition put in there. Now, the first Nephilim that were born of the angels, is that how the angels did this, or did the angels just show up and say, "Hey, look at my sexy wings. You know, I got an awesome robe, gold trim. You know." Wink,
I do
wink.
not believe that they were angels in the sense that I grew up being taught they were. First of all, we have to look at what's called comparative etymology. The Hebrew word for angel is malakim. Malakim, prior to that word joining the Hebrew religion, it meant deceased ancestors, disincarnate consciousness. That's why when they created giants, the giants were called Rephaim. Guess what the word Rephaim means?
What's that?
Deceased ancestors.
Oh.
They're ghosts. And so what they will do is they will tailor a body that looks like their real apparition and then step into it. Now, what's interesting about this is when you have a child that grows into that image, that entity can lay in that child and it really doesn't have to do anything. There's nothing it has to learn, right? It's a baby. So it can just hide in plain sight. Now, we also have that same phenomenon of switching.
That'd be the way you tell if you are one, because if you started out, dumb, like, I shouldn't say dumb. What's the word, Betsy, for the baby? If you started out
juvenile,
unknowing,
yes,
then you're not one. But if you come into this, well, they would probably know that they are one from the get-go, right?
Yeah, but how is the mom? Listen, I'm coming at this from the mom point. How do I know?
You know,
How do I know if my baby is one of these?
How do you know if you could have a
So
baby?
their pathology has mutated in the last 5,000 years. Now what they're doing is different. They're implanting babies in the womb and then pulling them out a lot of times before the woman even knows they were there.
Oh, so then
that's the missing fetus syndrome.
So they make like a test tube baby.
Exactly right, and that's why you have like Dr. Carla Turner's work. Let me say that, and
What was
I
that
want to
name
back up
again?
and make this point. You guys remember what I was talking about, the sexual pathology, where in the Apocrypha of John, they would show up in the image of their husbands, right? They would groom the woman. Now let's go to the UFO abduction phenomenon. Let's go to the work and research of Dr. Carla Turner. Dr. Carla Turner had an abductee she was working with named Ted Rice. Ted Rice was abducted along with his grandmother at the age of 8. Both of them are in a metallic room. There is an entity that walks up to his grandmother and tries to get her into intercourse. Why? Because, I mean, it's the same thing. I guarantee you, he harvested semen from somebody else, right?
His grandma?
Inseminate her with it. I'm sorry?
It tried to... okay. So
Now,
these guys, they don't care about age or the possibility, because
they need wombs. And we'll talk about that in a second. But watch this. This is very interesting. Look at the sexual pathology here and what I call the behavioral patterns. The woman looks at the entity and says, I've only been intimate with one man in my life. That's my husband. That's number 2. And number 3, he's been deceased for 11 years. Now, according to the data sample, right, in the Apocrypha of John, what do you think happened next?
It clearly showed itself as her husband.
As her husband.
Yep. An apparition of her husband came out of the corner of the room, and he tried to manipulate her into intercourse. Now, I have people that come to me all the time who have encountered these entities, call them incubi, call them grays, whatever you want to, and they will actually get the woman involved in some kind of sexual act. And then when they realize that the woman had a hysterectomy, they will verbally abuse her because they feel like this time's been wasted, and the phenomenon stops and they're never seen again.
Oh.
So it's procreation here. It's self-preservation, and I'll stop there.
So so if the woman does not have the means to reproduce, then they get all butthurt and sulk away crying, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh.
They're very...
See, that's interesting. That's interesting to me, because you would at first glance think that they would be all-knowing,
right?
That they would know. That's almost scarier that they don't know.
How do they?
That they don't already know.
So how do they find out? Like in their love sessions, they're in there. Hey, how you doing? So
well, I think that we're
dealing
dealing
with
under
the knife, or they've got a special probe on the end of their special probe that
actually. We can go in that direction too if you want. We can go into Ariel Master's work and his book Eros and Evil, and talk about the witches in the Middle Ages and how they would copulate with demons, and the demons they would copulate with would be circumcised. Now, this is very interesting. In addition to that, their appendages would be metallic.
Oh.
And so it's almost okay. It was
kind of like a
monolith
monolith in the middle of the Utah desert.
We're being enchanted by images, right? They're thinking they're copulating with a demon or an incubus, and truthfully, behind the veil, it's basic UFO abduction phenomenon.
So
they're being probed.
It's a metallic. Their penis was metallic, almost like it was a turkey baster.
Basically, it was metallic in the sense of a medical, medical.
We hear of that all the time.
So they're wearing a costume, and they're holding that thing down low, coming in like, "Hey, yeah, you ready for me?" And really, it's just the tool. Hit the plunger with the thigh.
Right.
Bingo, bango. Oh.
So we're dealing with the same phenomenon in behavioral patterns. They're victimologies. Okay, let's go to the victimology in the medieval ages. The victimologies, the same. It mirrors exactly what we find in Genesis 6. You would have physicians who would be called to a house where they would have a cot death. We would call it SIDS. And then after inspecting the child, going just ruling out everything else, then they would say that this had to have been a byproduct of an incubus. And so again, what they're doing is like the changelings of European folklore, right? Where a married couple would put their baby down into bed, go to bed, wake up the next day, and it looks like their baby in the bed.
But it's a hellraiser,
not.
causes trouble, and usually you have to make hopefully you can make a bargain to get your real child back.
Right.
A lot
so
of
they're
people
switching consciousness and they're switching bodies.
So they switch the consciousness with the born baby, and then they just put like an empty husk there, and they take the baby with them.
Yes. And it's not uncommon for them. In the Middle Ages, when you had witches who copulated with demons, the demon would actually send an apparition, put the apparition in bed with the husband, take the wife to a sabbat, right? And then the husband would get up to go take a leak or get a glass of water, looks over, and he thinks it's his wife in bed with him, and it's not.
So do you think these are extra dimensional?
Yeah, I was going to say where.
Or...
When we're talking, they're taking the babies, where?
Okay, so when we talk about, at least in my mind and my understanding, we need to be thinking about death as a dimension, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I liken death as stepping out of this room, a small room, out into a larger room that surrounds it.
Okay.
And so what they're doing is they're plucking consciousness out of this room, taking it into this room, right? And we would call that, we would say that that's them being interdimensional. Truthfully, it's just them opening one door, stepping into one room. Whenever they're done, leaving that room and going out to something else. So it's very important that we understand that these different manifestations and this phenomenon is linked. They're doing the same things, right? And so one of the things that like you asked me before, what was the end game? Like, why are they doing this? Well, first of all, we have to understand that they're necromancers.
Okay, so they like to do that's like death magic and bring
exactly right. Matter of fact, when you go back into the Bible, biblical antiquity, and you have the watchers, right, the actual angels that copulated with women, they were deceased mortals. That's why there were Malachim, ghosts, Rephaim, ghosts. In order to understand who the watchers
were, they deceased mortals of? Were they deceased humans? Because yes. I was under the impression that they were there during the creation of humanity.
They weren't. They weren't. And here's what's very interesting. When you go into the burial rites, okay, in biblical antiquity, like in the Old Testament, late Iron Age, they would actually have a ritual where when a person died, the family would they would go and grieve, but then they would leave the actual burial spot. They were called shelf tombs. They were they would cut rock out of a mountain or something, put the body in there, and then they would say, okay, we're going to go away for 7 days to grieve, and then we're going to assign an individual, not an angel, a mortal. We're going to pay them to watch the body in our absence. They were called watchers.
So they would watch the body to make sure it was dead?
Make sure that nobody tried to steal the body. Make sure that no predator tried to eat it.
Was there a market for stolen bodies?
I'm sorry?
Was there a market for stolen bodies? Is this like Palo Mayombe or what?
Basically, in necromancy, absolutely. That's where your vampirology comes from.
So they were making sure that some shady bastard didn't come and try to bring him back to life.
Right. So now look at the reversal of roles, though, right? What did the watchers do?
Then the watchers start, advertising on Craigslist, or the necromancers start advertising on Craigslist, or, we'll call it list, or whatever it was back in ancient Judaism, as watchers. Hey, we're a watcher company. You can pay us to watch. And then they're the necromancers. They step in, start doing shady stuff. Oh,
it was necrophilia.
Man.
Okay. They took unto them wives.
So this isn't this
They like
the
it
whole
cold.
end game isn't just for procreation of their species or whatever. It's also, like you said, a pathology.
Right. They have, okay, so these are the entities that I call molters.
Okay.
So they'll wear people like skin until that body degrades itself or it ages to the point where now it's got to move out, right?
Okay, so they're born wearing people's skin?
Yes, they were born as mortals. They had lives. They lived lives, absolutely.
Oh my hell. Okay.
And so what happened was, and this is very interesting as well, it's almost as if when they molted their own bodies, like I said, they stepped out into that larger room, guys, right? That interdimensionality. And they got an understanding of what the currency system is on that other side of death. And now when they step back into bodies, they would become like gods to us. Why? Because they understand everything that we don't. And so they would be able to work things. They would have gifts. And, you know, it was very fascinating. But in order for us to understand what's really going on is that to say that they're actually creating what's called an external soul. It's a corpse. It's a skin suit. Fritz Kramer calls it the social skin. It's the vehicle that would allow them to interact with this world around us.
How do we pick them out? Is there a way?
How long does the stake need to be?
How long what?
The wooden stake. How long?
How long? Is 12 inches enough? Is it best to run it in with a metal mallet or a wooden mallet?
And as they wear these social skins, do they just go about like normal people?
Yes.
Oh.
And they get jobs?
They'll have jobs, yes. And Malachi Martin, one of the great exorcists in Catholicism, would call them perfectly possessed. And so you would actually be sitting across the dinner table.
Not even know it.
Right. And again, we're used to men looking like monsters. We're not used to monsters looking like men.
Yeah.
So you won't understand who they are, what their morality is, what their belief system is, until they want to act upon something. Okay. And so let's go for a second, if we can, if we have time, let's go into serial killers.
Yes.
And some of the ways that they manifest.
Like Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yes. Memories that aren't theirs, right?
Serial killers manifest memories that aren't. So might they be possessed, but their mortal soul is still in there also, but the possession leans on it.
Transient. And so when you're like, I've been researching these guys for a while now. But when you're talking to a serial killer, you have to realize that they're incredibly intelligent, number one. Number two, they have their own morality. It's separate than ours. It's very different. You know what I mean? But when we're talking to serial killers, we're going to see, I mean, obviously you're going to have a portion of them who are just out there, right? But there are those like Dahmer and like Dennis Rader who manifest memories that are not theirs. Rituals that they're ignorant of, that only a necromancer in biblical antiquity would even understand, right?
Well, that's like the Zodiac killer.
Exactly right.
He's dropping hits.
So
now you've got guys like Ed Kemper. Obviously, his mom made him. But then you've got guys that may not have suffered that kind of childhood, and they end up. I mean,
did you watch the Chris Watts story from Colorado?
Yes.
Did you see the videos of his home?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's cold as ice. It's cold as ice.
Well, and they have video of the police entering his home, and you can hear the little girls in the police audio from the webcam or the cams that they wear, and the girls were gone at this point.
Okay, what?
So there are people that believe that house that they lived in actually played a part in the horrific crime where he killed his wife and his two daughters.
The guy who worked at oil fields.
Yes.
Oh.
So there's a lot of video now surfacing from inside the home, both that she recorded as well as was on the lapel cams from the police that first entered the home. It's terrifying stuff.
Oh yeah. It's horrifying. And one thing that It's always fascinated me is it's almost like when you're interviewing these entities, or not these entities, but these people, the entity in them, you'll be talking to the person. It's almost like the entity sometimes will look at you.
Oh.
Like when the
And then you'll be
queen's
talking,
eyes go
and they'll
weird.
just kind of make eye contact. And you can, it's so what we're dealing with is consciousness and memory in motion that's stepping in and out, right? I'm in and out. And so what you'll have are memories, like I said, memories that do not belong to them, and rituals that are performed by them that they should not be aware of, right? So Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite movie was The Exorcist. His only living victim came out of the restroom. According to his personal testimony, he said he turned to the right, saw Dahmer on his couch, swaying back and forth, speaking in an unknown language. Check. That's memory. That's language preference, but it's not his. Number two, Jeffrey Dahmer had an inkling where he would actually crush the bones of his victims into powder,
Yes.
go outside in a circular motion, fan them out in a necromantic ritual. But he shouldn't know that.
He'd never studied it. He had no idea.
Right.
So he had a passenger demon with him. He may not have been aware of it, but it was there.
Exactly right. And it's it's almost like you're dealing with DID, right?
Yeah.
Dissociative identity disorder, where the entity itself is stepping into skin whenever it wants to, and then stepping out.
Or maybe just whispering in the back of his mind.
Very true.
Interesting. So do
Very
you?
interesting.
So you do you teach demonology to students? Do you?
I have people that I work with, and I don't really have a course. I think that I may develop a course sometime next year.
It's interesting to me the way that you connect everything, because I think we all want to connect everything. We just can't seem to find those little filaments that drag all of these experiences into the same place.
The red yarn?
Yes, the red yarn.
Well,
so,
you've been at this for a while,
yeah.
and dedicated and focused.
So do you do house investigations?
Yes, I do house investigations, cleansings, and
do you have what is your absolute scariest house investigation?
That was a murder case. I had received a private message on Facebook. This was last year, and in my hometown there was a young girl who conspired with her friend to kill her family.
Oh.
And when I got there, you could feel consciousness was just there. It was stained. And the family themselves, they were having paranormal activity prior to and after the murder. And so when I got there, I operate like off of ignorance. I don't want to know anything. Especially like manifestations. I don't want to know anything, because if I get names, I don't want to be polluted, right? I don't want to say, okay. And so what I did is I took a voice recorder with me, and I took one of the family members with me, and we were going in and out of all the rooms upstairs. And actually, even before I showed up at the house, I had told the individual that reached out to me first. I said, as I'm closing my eyes right now, I'm walking upstairs to a second story of a house, and I'm being led into a closet where that entity is. She tells me, I was just in that closet last night. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So you have some psychic premonitions as well.
That kind of freaked me out, because I've been using that gift before, but not to that degree. That freaked me out too. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, whoa. But we go upstairs into a room, and we open up a closet, and there were green model trains in a milk carton. And I turned to the lady and I said, okay, I said, that entity is attracted, and it's almost like he's chained to this closet and to these items. I said, I don't know if they belong to him in his life before he died, or if they remind him of something, right? That, he went through and believed in, whatever, in life. So moving on. So I'm talking to her about that. And I said, this entity is attached to this closet. And so she was instructed not to say anything. So I could tell she was biting at the bit. So we turn back around, we go to another closet right in the same room. We open it up, and there was fishing equipment, tackle boxes, fishing poles. And I said, his consciousness is attached to these items as well. So I went into the victim's room, which is right around the corner, and I could hear her. She was trying to come through, but it was very light. And so I told the lady, I said, I'm going to go downstairs in the kitchen. We're going to go down there rather. And I want to go in there and just see what I feel. I said, for some reason, I'm being instructed to go down there because she's not able to communicate with me like she wants to. So I go downstairs into the kitchen. And as I'm talking to the lady, I see the apparition of the wife sitting at the wooden dinner table on a wooden chair, smoking a cigarette. Like I wasn't even there, smoking a cigarette. The only problem is she's not there and the chair's not there. So the only thing that's really present in that kitchen was the kitchen table.
And the wife,
So
that's the mom that the girl killed?
Yep. And the 15-year-old that actually did the murder, when she came into the house, she had a male's voice, a male guttural voice coming out of her body. It's possession. So
now, did did she live, and what's her account of things?
As far, you mean the victim or the
killer?
Yes. They I think they were both charged as adults, but yeah.
What's her account of things? What does she say?
Do they know? Does she know? Is she conscious to the idea that this was something that was happening beyond her control?
I would agree. And once I finish this, I'm going to get into how I met the actual social worker.
Okay.
It's mind-blowing. Hand to God. I swear to God it happened. I couldn't believe it because I was actually sitting at the same spot originally where the person reached out to me first. I was sitting in that same restaurant in the same chair when I met the social worker that was working with him. It's crazy. So I'm downstairs in the kitchen. And I said, okay, now that we're wrapping things up, I'm going to go into the living room. And that's when I have a sit down with everybody. There was an atheist there present. And I said, first of all, there was a very violent man here. And I said, he hates women. And I feel like he had either beat his wife or even killed her in real life. He's just a very, very evil man. And we get to talking about it, and the victim's husband, he kind of tears up, and he goes, you know what? He goes, now that you're mentioning it, he said, my father-in-law, which was the victim's father, he was a very violent man. He would go into rages. He would go on binges where he would do drugs, and then he'd get drunk, and he would beat this victim unconscious to the where for 10 years she had to go through PTSD therapy. He said finally one night he had pulled his car up when they were just dating and said, get all your stuff, get it in my truck. I got to get you out of here. That man's evil. That man died.
In that house? Or just with
Not in the house, but he died.
Like with that tackle box or...
Yeah, it's very interesting because it was deeply troubling to me in a sense, but it helped me understand the way these entities operate. So he said, the husband there, he goes, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. He goes, when he died, we put all of his stuff upstairs in a closet. And I said, okay, so the green model trains. He goes, yeah. He goes, matter of fact, whenever he would get into rages, the only way his wife could snap him out of it was to put him in a truck, drive him to Toys R Us, and buy him green model trains. He said, those are his. When he died, we put all of his stuff upstairs. He said, he said, even more than that, Nathan, he said, you know who made that table in the kitchen? He did. He said, in the chair that you saw, we put in the garage out there. So it was him. And so what I did is I did a cleansing ritual, and the room got very hot. I mean, it was like the atmosphere got very intense and heated. Husband starts doing this. He's freaking out, going, oh my God, get it off me. It's too hot. It's hot. It's burning.
So the husband was the husband of the lady?
Yes.
Who got killed, the victim. So the daughter came home. How many family members did she kill, and who were they? Her mom?
One. It was just the mother.
Okay.
They were the son and then the husband were able to fight her off, thankfully. But so we did the cleansing, and when I did the cleansing, you could visibly see the darkness leave the house. It's almost like you slowly turning on a light in a room, and you see it just leaving.
So was the mother, was she the previous, was the evil husband like her previous husband?
No, the mother, that was her father.
That was her father.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm.
And
the victimology.
What did you guys do with his stuff, and how much C4 did you
I don't know what they've done with it lately. I told them to get it out.
Yeah.
Get it out and burn
I mean, if we're taking notes, everybody, let's jot this down at the top of the page, please.
Yeah, don't be
don't
afraid.
Don't keep the asshat's belongings in the home.
Yeah, right. Don't be afraid.
His consciousness is tied to it.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so what's fascinating about this is because the lady that I was working with, that was walking with me throughout the house, she was going through upstairs and everything and crying and screaming because you could actually see. It was like somebody just flipped lights on everywhere. It's crazy. 2 weeks later, the family had been wanting, they've been wanting me to go and talk to the daughter. And it got very complicated because they're still doing the investigation, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of legal precedents that have to take place. And I just thought, you know what? I'm not really comfortable doing that right now. And so they were kind of fine with that too. Anyway, so about 2 weeks later, I'm sitting, like I said before, in the same restaurant, in the same chair, reading. That's what I do. I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. Lady sits down next to me, asks me what I'm reading. So we get in a conversation about what I do, and I talk about a case. I left out names and certain things just because I didn't want her to know too much. She goes, well, I have heard of you, Nathaniel. She said, and I can tell you that everything that you've told me tonight is 100% true, but I can't tell you yet how I know. So about 45 minutes later, she opens up. She says, the night you did the cleansing, the daughter comes to the social worker and says, the demon that's been coming in my cell, I got chills. The demon that's been coming in my cell walked in tonight and told me I can't come here anymore. I've got to go.
Oh, so you even threw it out of her even though she wasn't there.
Yes. Yeah, that blew my mind.
So I was kind of hoping you'd lighten the mood and say you met her, and then we start the rom-com. You guys are ice skating.
No, man. It was very intense. But one thing that I learned in that haunting was that the victimology was the same thing in life as it was in death.
Well, he got ultimate revenge on his daughter for leaving.
He possessed the girl. See, what's very interesting as well, he could not open his own door. Now, this gets into insight into, number one, how they operate and why it is that there's some inconsistencies here. So we've seen apparitions open doors before, right? Shadow figures, they'll just open the door and walk through. Why couldn't he open his own door?
Well,
see,
yeah.
He had to have someone else open that for him. Why couldn't he have held his own knife? He could have, but he had to possess somebody and hold the knife for him. So there is a human component here. It's almost as if these entities are following different laws. And they have to follow those laws in order to stay within the legal parameters of whatever they're doing. So sure, I can open the door. Sure, I can kill them. But I need to possess somebody. There has to be a human element involved.
Well, do you think shadow people are of the same ilk as the demons and the possessors?
Yes. Matter of fact, in biblical antiquity, they have what were called shades, shadows. They were souls that were literally devolving. And so there's like, okay, evolution is, going forward. It's almost as if they're devolving into nothingness.
So they can't possess anymore, but they can still torment.
Yes. Matter of fact, since you mentioned that, I'm very confident that some of the apparitions that manifested in Genesis 6 were shadow figures. Because in the Apocrypha of John, it says that they created copies of bodies, clones. Yeah, right? Same, they look like each other, but there's copies of them. And number two, that they pulled from the darkness consciousness and placed it in there. So it's a dark spirit. It's very, very interesting. I'm not going to ramble, but there's all kinds of ways to think about it.
So this ties in with a lot of the UFO action, and I know right now James is probably asking a few questions about that. Let's jump over to the comments real quick and see what we've got here. All right, we'll go down. We've got a few people saying this is scary.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like it. So James does. He asks, you think aliens might be demons? And then he also mentions the Son of Sam killer who he believed he was controlled by a demon. Now, didn't that initially come out as a story that the dog, the neighbor's dog was telling him things? And and he's asking, is there a difference between like an evil spirit and a demon? And do possessing spirits, are they, I mean, they're evil on our spectrum, but are they doing this maliciously, or are they doing it just because that's what they do?
Well, I would answer that by saying this, that there is a profound contrast between the molters and your general evil, malevolent, possessing entity. Like the best data sample that I would suggest people to research would be the Dybbuk phenomenon, the Dybbuk phenomenon in the 16th century. The Dybbuk was never about a wine box, never. You know, this was actually about ghosts possessing human bodies in what they call the age of the demoniac, which is the 16th century. But you had entities who were evil, right? They were evil.
Well,
they were
the
possessing
ghosts,
people.
Wouldn't some of the ghosts, they would just hop into the closest body just because they could, and you had to cover all the mirrors, or the ghost would stare at itself in the mirror and just stay there forever. There was a whole bunch of I don't know, ritual around how you managed when someone passed away.
Right.
Just
hide all the mirrors,
just because the spirit would be cut loose, and you wanted to ensure that the spirit went to the other side and carried on and didn't stick around either through possession or through as a shade, more or less.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Shade. There were ways that they could like hope to navigate around that, but inevitably you would have cases, and we did, where one, I want to say this, a teenager was possessed by an entity who was a very, very, very evil man in life. Very evil. I'm not going to get into what he did, but he had a certain youthful victimology, and he had he acted like an incubus to this guy. Okay.
So was he?
I'm not trying. I don't want to be explicit. Okay.
Was he a pedophile? Explicit?
Yes. Okay. I didn't know if I could say. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're fine. You can curse. You can do whatever. So he was a pedophile, and after he died, his spirit wanted to continue to be. He wanted to continue to do to defile youth.
Yes, and so once he defiled the young man, he actually possessed him. And this goes back to the pathology here, guys. When we're dealing with incubi cases, that it was penetration that was the vehicle to possession. That's why it's important. Right?
So this
Remember
is a sixth grade.
They're penetrating, they're putting consciousness in there, and that we would call that possession. But anyways, this particular case happened in the 17th century when a young boy was brought to the exorcist by his father, and he's asking the entity, because these are Kabbalistic exorcists, so their rituals are different than that of the Vatican. Number one, it's what's your name? Tell me when you died, how'd you die, why are you here, and all this stuff. As he's talking to this entity, the entity says, I'm a pedophile in life.
So
he said,
this is what I do. I'm a disgusting bastard.
He's operating its memory and motion. His victimology is the same. And he said that this young man was taken to an apple orchard by his father, and he picked an apple off a tree. And he said, it just so happened to be the tree that I committed my very first act of pedophilia under. Now, I don't want to talk about this. But we have to get it out there.
So the soul,
the information and data
so when the guy died, the soul went to the tree and hung out there, per se, maybe in the meat of that apple, waiting.
Serial killer. Think of serial killers. He was stalking his old crime scenes.
Oh, he's creepy bastard. Now, what about jinn? Are jinn along the same lines, or?
They are. So your jinn or jinnah in the Islamic tradition, again, it's the same phenomenon. All of this is. The very first question that an Islamic exorcist would ask someone is, have you had a dream where you had intercourse with somebody other than your spouse?
Wow.
If so, have you had a dream that you're pregnant with something? Because, and I'm going to get into this very quickly, in the 16th century, in the debug phenomenon, they had so many cases, it was an explosion of demonic possession, but they began to have women who would show up for an exorcism, and the entity possessing her would look like a baby in her womb. So much so that they actually had a conference and said, is it possible that we as demonologists and exorcists, is it possible that we have been looking at possession the wrong way? Is it possible that possession is pregnancy to them? I'll tell you, watch this. Here's how we know that's a fact, because if we go even after that into the Middle Ages, we see that the incubi entities were called by your physicians. They were called larvae.
Oh, now was it
early forms of life?
Now was that at the same time
Crazy
that the Inquisition was going on?
Mm-hmm.
And did they have a tie-in together, or?
Not so much, but again, you would have what are called demonic pregnancies. What we have to see, though, here is this. It's not that the apparition is creating a child. It's not like you have a father and a son. You have the father, the apparition, that steps into the body of the son. And so the son, right, they're one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all the same phenomenon, but possession was pregnancy to them.
Mm.
The question is, like, okay, we had a widow. She was called the widow of Demona. And Demona is a prophet in Israel. And she was possessed by her deceased husband. When she showed up to the exorcist, the entity had crawled up in the fetal position in her womb. Was she possessed?
Or was she pregnant?
So,
very interesting.
Okay, so she was possessed by her deceased husband.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, why was, I don't know. I mean, so possession obviously doesn't have to be, I guess, unless her deceased husband was a jerk, but it doesn't have to be an evil.
Yeah.
I mean, it is inherently evil to take control of someone else, but he probably didn't intend it as evil, maybe a little bit selfish.
We don't know.
Confused. Maybe he felt lost, but that pulls it away from the alien theory, unless, the initiation of everything is aliens, and then that's a part of us, like,
right.
I don't know.
What if he just wore a social skin the whole time that they were together?
Ooh.
There we go.
Yeah, what if he could have
traveling, right? He's traveling. His consciousness still
she
exists.
has no idea, obviously.
She married a demon. She married a bastard.
Yahweh in the Bible called these entities soul hunters.
Did they, now when they took when they, for lack of a better word, when they killed the baby, did that baby's soul go back to heaven or to the next?
That is what's called the blood guilt. And I'm not going to get into theology, but that's why in the Bible, Yeshua or Jesus did everything that he did. Look,
okay.
Right? He's the Son of the Father. He's the Word made flesh. He's the image of the Father, right? It was almost as if he leveled the playing field to a degree, right? Even more so than that, obviously. But going back into the idea of, okay, like what are they doing, right? What's the whole purpose here? It's self-preservation. So if we go into the book of Ezekiel chapter 13, Yahweh says, I am against you, those of you who hunt the souls of men to make them fly. It's a reference to murder, where you would kill somebody and what's called the Ba'as soul, or the bird soul in Egyptology, would fly out like a bird. We would call it an orb, a real orb. So he said that these entities that we're dealing with today were soul hunters in the Bible, but they also had their own victimology, right? Their victimology is that they would go into homes in the middle of the night, it's UFO abduction. They would induce a sleep state into the woman or the man, incubi and succubi, right? That's incredible. And then they would kill the person, take a knife or some kind of device, and then cut a piece of their flesh off of their body, and then sew it like paper mache onto their own. And they were creating what? A social skin.
They were being like Wild Bill on Silence of the Lambs.
Leatherface, the Beast of Jersey, right? They're creating something where their consciousness can step into it.
Like Ed Gein. Ed Gein, that's a real life story. He was a grave robber. He would
He was.
Yeah. We definitely have to do a show on him and in depth.
So have you been there, present, or participated in an exorcism?
I have, but it hasn't been what people would call like the throwing of holy water. So that's the Catholic ritual. The exorcisms that I have performed have been with like oil, which is another rite, the applying of oil, the praying, and all that stuff. And also exorcisms of baptism, which is really what the holy water is essentially. But I have not been in terms of like where people just throw holy water and they're dealing with it in that way. So I have been doing that, but not in the tradition of the Catholic Church.
What was it like being around a possessed person? Like what were they doing?
Well, it's very interesting because I grew up in the Pentecostal tradition. I'm not Pentecostal anymore. But the deliverance ministries was very interesting in that movement. They weren't like a lot of the people see on TV, where it's just kind of very commercialized.
You said deliverance, and I'm thinking
born and raised as missionaries kids in Africa.
When you said deliverance, I'm thinking kayak rides and squealing like pigs and banjos.
There was a lot of weird stuff. We had one guy, Jonathan Zuber, would come through and preach, and he walked by a lady at a conference at our church, my old church, and the lady was fine, just chill. He walks by her claws, like she does this, her eyes roll back in her head, and she lunges at him. And then he goes to her, he's like trying to pray with her and deliver her, and she speaks in fluent French to him. "Hello, Jonathan, do you remember me from when you cast me out last year in Ethiopia?" So that was my introduction into the deliverance ministry, but it was very unique. It wasn't like commercialized, some of the things we've seen on TV where it's, but I have been there, but it has not been that tradition.
Okay. So that would freak me out if someone, that would be a new level of the word ghosting me, came up and speak to me.
They would cough up, what's it called, ectoplasm. We would wipe it up with a towel or a napkin, close the napkin, open it back up, and it's not there anymore.
Oh man!
So
it's
it's a fascinating phenomenon. But that's when I started to realize that some of these entities, they're very ignorant. They're not biblically literate. You know what I mean? And in my mind, I thought a fallen angel was supposed to be like a master of theology.
Yes, this is the problem.
But they fell
I'm having.
before most of the Bible was written. I mean, they were there for the first 3 pages, and then it's something else.
If that blueprint is to fit the model, then right. But sadly, it doesn't. And not, like I said before, not only is the exorcistic rite not for fallen angels, right? It's for mortals.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, but I'll stop rambling.
Wow.
That's super interesting stuff. Okay, so for you, where do you take this? What do you do with this wealth of information? Are you writing books? Are you teaching? Are you doing seminars?
Well, everything was pretty much shut down because of COVID this year. I'm lecturing at 2 Paracons next year already. There's one that is it's pretty much already locked down. So I'll be doing a 30-minute lecture there. It's going to be a huge one. My second book is out for pre-order. My link is on my Instagram bio. It's called The Skin That Crawls.
Yes, I saw that.
Okay.
Oh, so you already you have one book. Tell us about that.
Well, I had lost a friend to drug addiction, and it really affected me. And so I kind of wrote that book for people who felt called to do something with their life, but were medicating the gift they're called to manifest.
Oh,
and so I go through the stages of people who know they have a gift or know they want to help people, and they're more empathic, you know. And so I go through some of those ideas and give different stories and just really try to help people. But that is, you know, it's not about demonology. So The Skin That Crawls is going to be my first book on what the Mulcher is, what they're after, what they're doing. And then it's going to be very fascinating. I hope so, at least.
And your first book is A Moment Called Man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to read that.
Yeah, and we've got I just flashed his website up there, but it's NJ Gillis GILLIS.com, and he's got a website up there. Research, guest appearances about me, booking, Facebook and Instagram links, all up on there. But yeah, go check out his website, especially if you want to gather some more creepy information. I have one final question I really need to ask. How do I protect myself, and what does male, what would you call it? The sexual protective underwear, the garter.
The chastity belt.
Yeah, chastity belt. What does that look like? What metal works best to keep the demons away?
Okay, so your incubus and succubus have different ways they work on people.
Now, they may be the same entity, just portraying themselves different.
I don't think they are.
You don't think they are?
Yeah. No, I think that they are gender specific. You know what I mean? I don't think, and that's a theory. I'm still looking at it.
Hey, there's 47 of those.
Right?
I'm
but
incubex.
That's just my humble opinion. But when we're dealing with, like if I was working with a married couple and they were experiencing an incubus, I would want intimacy increased. I would want time alone with them.
You want to drain the old man so there's nothing to get. So he's all flaccid and tired.
Well, but you have to understand what that entity is after. I've had cases where it would literally wait until the couple goes to bed at night and lay in between them, just so the husband can feel its presence. And so that's what it wants to do. It secludes. That's its modus operandi. So if it's an incubus, increased intimacy.
So you want to bring them closer together. You want him to be worn out. You want him to be just blowing air. I dig it.
I want them to make sure that if there's any kind of trauma or unforgiveness or any kind of just separations, I want all of those taken care of, that healed as best possible.
Some good counseling.
Because that entity will manipulate that whole situation. Even to the point where I've had cases where it would work on the husband to the point where the husband doesn't even want to stay in the house anymore.
Gentlemen, for all the guys out there.
Sorry?
For all the guys out there, this is the excuse when she says you left the toilet seat up again. It wasn't you. It was
me, man.
Goddamn incubi trying to come between you and your wife. So go make love to her and wear that self out. Go on. Sorry.
It sounds kind of erotic and crazy, but that's what I recommend.
It's kind of closing all of the doors that it would use to get in.
And that's what they're doing. They're bringing eroticism, so you fighting fire with fire. You're lighting a stop fire.
How do they choose a victim? How does one make themselves just completely, they're just uninteresting?
Okay, so just like a serial killer has his own pathology and victimology.
Yeah, so some of them like brunettes, some like the gingers.
Yes, you're right.
The gingers are probably easier because we know they don't have a soul.
So, okay, so let's go back to the actual question because it's very important. So one of the ways that I recommend staying away from them, because I do believe that prevention's better than intervention.
Sure.
The most difficult entity to get rid of, bar none, is an incubus. Because it feels like it has a reason to be there. Its entire purpose is to take physical and spiritual possession of the woman.
It's like a horny 15-year-old, just all that bound up energy and yeah.
Right. So most of the cases that I have with an incubus entity, it would work on the wife in the sense of an attachment. There is a profound feeling, it's a presence. I have been in like kitchens with wives, and they're holding their husband's hands, and you could feel that entity walk in, and it's almost as if it's victimizing her again, and it would just want me and the husband to know you can't do anything about it. Now, it's not true. Obviously we did a lot with it, did a lot, to get rid of it, but that's its mentality. So we need to be thinking about narcissists. That's how they are. And so they'll love bomb their victims. They'll appear to them in dreams. They'll start out by touching the neck, playing with the hair.
Wearing goofy
like
hats
this is did. He would
necking him at
the
the
husband
bar.
asked me, he said, how is it that I can feel him at my feet and my wife can feel him at her hair and her head? Because that entity was laying in between them that night. So there's many different ways to discuss this and to deal with it, but I think that's the most important thing. Inspire intimacy, and I'm not just physicality. Go on a date, write out your vows again, and while you're doing that, have somebody that is knowledgeable and experienced with dealing with an incubus, and go in and try to get that out of the house. So you have to work on it on both ends there.
You got to come at it from two directions. The couple needs to handle their business, and then an exorcist comes in and tries to eradicate.
Right. So you can do amulets too, crosses, prayers, rosaries, candles. You can do sage. You can do all kinds of things. And, it's just, I'll say it again, the most difficult entity to get rid of is the incubus because it feels like it has authority to be there.
Now, what is the succubus's deal?
Succubus is usually a dream. It's a female spirit it's very interesting. It's purely there not to take charge of the husband, not to dominate the husband into submission. It wants substance from you. It wants excretions. And so your succubus entity will put a man in a dream state and inspire things and then collect it and get out.
I'm sure that's hard to do. God, they got.
And that was your Lilith, right? Because you mentioned that earlier in the interview. That's what Lilith did.
Yeah, Lilith. Apparently, according to religion, she wouldn't lay underneath Adam. So God, said, that's what you're supposed to do. So she cursed his name. So she was cursed to bear 10,000 baby demons a day or something like that. Anyway, so we're coming to the end of the interview, but this has been a wild ride and a lot to chew on. We'll have to have you come back on again, especially after your book's out. We're going to have to grab your current book that's out and read through that. And we'd like to obviously have you back on to talk about that.
Sure. And I know that my research is often very dark. It's very complicated. Sometimes it's very difficult to rationalize that this is actually occurring.
We're going to have to get a light to shine on your face so that we can lighten the mood a little bit. And I'll put a banner on the screen of daisies, maybe toss a rainbow.
In my lectures, I'll just put up puppy dogs right in the middle of it.
Bam.
Yeah.
Need to. Got to. Yeah. I need to thank you. I'm not going to sleep very well tonight. And, humming. But
it's interesting. It's an interesting process or an interesting thought-provoking conversation.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. We
never even got to talk about the scarification.
Oh, Oh my goodness. Well, we've got a few more listener comments, but we're going to have you back on again. And
So-
sorry to everyone on the live. We're having some buffering issues, it looks like. So remember, you can go and watch this and watch clips of it on any of your, wherever you go to watch stuff. But we have, Sarah says, well, she wants to get your book and check it out. She says, I agree with that. I don't feel they are the same and just change form. That's obviously about me asking if they are the same entity changing between male and female.
Right. And I'm not saying that. I'm still looking at that. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say definitively, right? I mean, that's a part of my research that I'm anxious to get to.
James would like to know what you think of skinwalkers.
Skinwalkers, they're necromancers, same thing.
Yeah, skinwalkers are necromancers. The Negloshi, yes, they are. That says it clearly, and they have different rituals for getting rid of them.
Right.
You use a lot of ash, I believe, weapons dipped in ash. Sarah also does house investigations and other things, and she says we did a house case that had maybe she meant to say lot, or a lost of those sexual demon signs described. Very scary and nearly impossible to get rid of. That sounds like an incubus. Yes.
And they'll get violent. I've had them fight physically.
Oh, well, they're sons of bitches, then, those
How common is this?
and then you get a pedophile one, so he's a son of a bitch on every level. How do you get rid of that? Well, obviously, dynamite, TNT, nuclear strike, you clear the neighborhood out. I'm thinking 500-pound bombs centrally located in the living room.
He'll just leave his social skin.
Well, I say we'll leave that social skin spread around about 18 blocks.
How common are these?
Incubus, you'll have maybe one a year.
That's too many.
Oh, you'll
way too
encounter one a year for your geographical
That's
Like
location.
a real incubus.
Not
No.
you'll have one a year. Enjoy
No, but one
like.
one known case a year is too much.
Oh,
Right.
obviously, I think one known case. I think the fact that they're there is too much.
Well, yeah, because it's very troubling in many ways, because you have someone who says, okay, I was physically attacked. And then you go to the doctor, and the doctor's saying, okay, tell me what happened. And now they're painted as crazy, right?
Oh,
They're nutty, and it's
How many
very
people-
hard to get them to deal with that trauma. You know what I mean? It's very difficult.
And how many don't come forward? I mean, one a year that comes forward. How many don't because of that very reason?
Yeah.
In terms of the entity or the victim?
Both.
victim.
The
victim.
the victim.
Okay, let's get back to the victimology here. I've had cases where it wasn't even an incubus case. It was almost like marriage counseling. You know, they were dealing with paranormal activity in the home, but the wife had experienced an incubus case, but it was fleeting. Like, it wasn't present. It would come in and out, and then would not be would not return for 10 or 12 years.
Oh.
And so you have those cases too. But when we're dealing with an incubus, you're dealing with the most savage kind of man you would ever think. Now, again, he's narcissistic. He's a psychopath. He does not care. There are cases where they would actually be tearing a flesh, and that entity would leave. Now, let's go deeper for a second, and I don't want to get too dark. Sinistrari had a victim, more than one. And Father Sinistrari, Ludovico Maria Sinistrari, he was a Franciscan priest. But he had victims of incubi who they didn't die from the attack, but later on in their lives, they suffered some kind of disease and they died. So he would do an autopsy, and he would peel back the eyelids, and that incubus had carved its symbols underneath their eyelids.
In the red fleshy part up underneath?
Yes. To where the individuals themselves would have scarification in their private areas, in areas where like the victims themselves, they could not even see it.
How olden day priests are a different level of, because I don't think any of our priests today are ready to start cutting people open. Now, before we close out, we've come to the end, but Sarah Sarah made one last comment that I think's pretty prolific for this. And she says, look at how sexualized society is now. So it's probably way more common than you think.
You're exactly right. Everything is sexualized, and
where nowadays sex seems to be in everything, in your commercials, in everything. So that probably has enhanced it. So you may see one a year, but how many are blowing by? And also, how would the victim know to get a hold of you? I mean, it's not like you probably got a billboard on Main and Broadway in your town.
And let's go deep. I mean, I agree with you. Let's take it a step forward. How many entities are not as verbose and violent with them?
Yeah. What if it's a gentle incubus, drops off flowers, calls her 3 days after, does all the proper incubi mating ritual, and not just a shady bastard that, stops in when he's drunk and, messes up the house, leaves the toilet seat.
They have to be operating off of our memory. So when you go into the demons in the medieval period, and you see these entities that the witch is copulated with, these entities knew the the kind of ethnicity that a lot of these women had a preference for. So if these women like tall Latino guys, they show up as a tall Latino guy.
Mi amor.
Right.
They get all swoony.
They're looking into us, and they're looking for a memory or an image that they can conform to.
They can kind of read minds prior to the event, so they know what you like. They know what
right.
What
Otherwise,
about your
the
husband.
Experiences wouldn't be as they are.
Oh, shoot. All right. Well, Nathaniel, thanks for coming on. We'll line up and have you on again after the book comes out, and we'll make sure that we line up a notification for when the book does come out, so we can check that out, and we'll have you back on. We'll dig in. We'll gain a little more knowledge so that our show can be a little more highbrow next time, and not just me quipping bad jokes.
And me with my mouth agape the whole time.
Yeah. Well, you drilled a little bit.
I have at least 1 million questions now.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, but thanks again for coming on. We'll have to have you back and dig in this a little deeper, and maybe we'll gain some more questions. Maybe even we'll gain some people saying they believe that.
What a cool show.
This is this is very good. Yeah, very good. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back on next week, and you can plan on probably sometime in the beginning of next year, we'll have Nathaniel back, and
Wonderful.
We'll dive back into this creepiness. And Nathaniel may have some fresh and horrible stories to tell us.
Holy cow.
Good spooky. This one we should have kicked out before Halloween.
Yeah. Nice to meet you, Nathaniel. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Very
Thank
nice.
you so much, guys. It was my pleasure. I'm looking forward to coming back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry it was so dark, but again, the data sample has to be real.
What else could it be, honestly?
Right, it's demons.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, we're talking demons in possession. Well, there was this one that liked to paint, and this other one that was a home decorator. Best at feng shui.
The best massages ever. And paid my bills.
Oh, well, I'm sure some of them give some good massages. Yes, probably. All right, Nathaniel, you have a good night, man.
Guys.
Be safe.
You guys have a good night as well. Thank you so much.
Keep in touch. Anything new goes on. And we'll shoot a message out to Michelle. Tell her we want you back sometime next year after your book comes out. And to let us know when the book comes out so we can nab that and give it a read.
It's up for pre-order now, but yeah, okay. You guys have been a blast. Thank you so much. Honestly, it's always a humbling thing for people to even take the time to hear my research.
Oh, no, we dig it.
Really good.
We dig it anytime, man. And if something new comes up, even if you just got some crazy story, shoot Michelle to, have her shoot us a message and say, hey, we'll we're open to have you on anytime. If you got a wild story, please
awesome,
bring
man.
it.
We'll make it happen, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night, man.
You too.
Bye.
Not a sign of a human. Why does it feel not a sign of a human?